One of the things that I try to avoid when sitting down to watch a show for review is hype. Granted, unless you live in a man-made cave in your parents' basement, it's usually pretty easy to actually tell which particular shows of any given season are the most popular. It's worse for me as a person on social media because I have people constantly asking me my thoughts on particular shows that happen to be airing any given season. And I do get nervous when I sit down to watch these shows because I know that they're not gonna live up to the hype. It's rare that a show ever does, so I prefer to prepare for the worst, but then be hopefully surprised if anything and everything turns out well. Sometimes, though, I end up watching these shows and seriously questioning why they became so popular in the first place. There are some elements that are true to all, if not most of them. Solid animation, good designs, and music. But I always find there's this decisive lack of solid characters and stories to get truly excited about. There may be a brilliant setting to start the story off with, but after that, everything just kind of falls flat. Which brings us to today. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. We are looking at Akame ga Kill, a 2014 anime by Studio White Fox that takes place in a fantasy universe with pseudo-Super Sentai characters who attempt to stick it to the man. Let's jam. Welcome to Fantasy Universe 427 or something, a country whose name I cannot recall, so it's obviously not that important, ruled over by a truly gluttonous and evil minister who brainwashes the young emperor and keeps the populace in check with fear and violence. This setting takes cues from various other fantasy settings, at times feeling like it belongs very much in pre-industrial times, but with a splash of modern magic. The story goes that thousands of years ago, a previous emperor, knowing that he was going to die, ordered the creation of devices referred to as imperial arms, so that his legacy would live on after death. Each of these devices have a variety of magical and heavily supernatural powers, most in the form of weapons, with several used for other means. Over the years since their creation, many imperial arms have been lost or traded hands, but it is commonly known that only people with imperial arms can hope to defeat others with imperial arms. Enter Night Raid, a rebellious group soul-bent on the assassination of the minister and those evil people in power who follow him. Each member of Night Raid has their own imperial arms acquired through various means, which they use to defeat the copious amounts of powerful bodyguards and soldiers that the minister controls. Over the course of the show, Night Raid fights, and in many cases defeats a variety of Imperial Arms users, with the goal apparently being to save the kingdom by removing the minister from the picture. Though we know nothing of their plans after that. Akame ga Kill is very much a Monster of the Week type show, with each new episodes, or sometimes a couple of episodes, showcasing a brand new character and their powerful, super, ultra, mega, you can't defeat this imperial arms. In that way, it's boring and simplistic, with major focus being put on the various different combat scenes that are framed in such a way that it reminds me very much of those fantasy who would win type battles that, we partake in on the internet. There is one thing about the fights that I think many people appreciate, and that is the lack of plot armor. To put it simply, plot armor is when any given character is invincible just because the plot demands them to be so. The majority of characters on both sides of the battlefield can and will die. It's one of the reasons why I keep seeing this show constantly and favorably compared to Game of Thrones, even though that's an extremely unfair comparison. And you may ask, what do you mean it's an unfair comparison? Well, while no secondary character has any plot armor, unlike Game of Thrones, you can be sure that the main characters do. The biggest problem I have with how the character deaths are portrayed in the series, however, is not that they exist, but how our characters react to them. Many a time a character will die, and by the end of the episode, someone attempts to crack a joke and bring the tone of the episode back into the much more lax feeling that it attempts to have most of the time. It is never all seriousness, and while I will admit that some levity in some of those more really heavy, impactful scenes is sometimes totally necessary and fine, going from slapstick comedy to emotional character death and back again very quickly is not something I am a particular fan of. Our quote-unquote main character also leaves quite a bit to be desired. Unlike what the show's title and promotional art would have you believe, the dark-haired, red-eye assassin Akame is not the show's protagonist, however much I wish she was. Instead, what we have is a generic, cookie-cutter, naive guy named Tatsumi to fill the protagonist's shoes. I'm harsh on the guy mainly because he seems to come off as just some amalgamation of various different fantasy protagonists from other shows with the same general tone. And not just in how he behaves and thinks, but also in just how he looks. Like his character design with the disheveled hair and casual clothing. His look just screams, "Hey guys, I'm the protagonist!" which I find just trite and annoying. What I did find interesting though is that because he is the protagonist, our view of all the antagonists come through his eyes. Our disposition towards any given character directly mirrors Tatsumi's own. His friends are our friends, his enemies are enemies. Unfortunately, because he also comes with the nice guy character trait, it's actually pretty hard to say whether or not any character is really an enemy at any given moment. The show spends a great deal of time on morality and characters on both sides of the debate, if you want to call it that. It's more like a battle royale rather than a debate. Characters on both sides are almost identical to each other, with the exception of who they kill for. Even Night Raid's direct opponents, the kingdom's specialized team of warriors known as the Jaegers, are almost virtually identical to Night Raid themselves, but just so happen to be following orders from the corrupt minister and lead villain Tits McFrost Queen. And that kind of leads into what I feel to be this show's lesson. Morality is really the only boundary between good and evil. Like, you could say that the Jaegers are the show's villains, as they spend the majority of the time in the role of antagonist. But with only two exceptions, the majority of the Jaeger members are just generally good people, or at the very least as good as some of the Night Raid members. The two exceptions, of course, being the aforementioned Ice Queen Esdeath, who just has no sense of morality whatsoever when it comes to killing people, and the character of Seiyu Ubiquitous, who's just a crazy bitch. The other major thing to the show's credit is how it handles its action. Because of the variety of characters and weapons, you can't fall back on a standard fighting style for all characters. Not everyone uses just a sword, so the character animations have to be varied in a very extreme way, and Akame ga Kill delivers on that brilliantly. Even going into the majority of these shows' battles knowing that somebody is going to die, the question remains of how they're going to die. No two deaths are the same, and I truly have to give credit to whoever was responsible for laying out all of these scenes in very unique and interesting ways. Also, double credit to the animators for the sheer amount of varied gore. The show does not play nice in this regard. When you have people die, and they make sure that you know someone is dead. So dead that they are not coming back. In the sound department, I can't speak for an English dub because A, there isn't one, and B, there is no true confirmation from the show's North American licensor, Sentai Filmworks, that there will ever be one. I can say, however, that this show doesn't need it. The story is not complex enough to the point where I would say you would truly benefit from having the dialogue spoken in your native language. Now, to be fair, I also say no dub because it's very rare that I've actually ever found a Sentai dub to be better than its Japanese counterpart. That's just me, though. For sound, though, I will say that the soundtrack is both a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that on its own, the music sounds goddamn amazing. One track specifically, Le Chant de Roma, is particularly superb, and became one of those songs that I had to track down after hearing it for the first time in an episode. Bad thing is that this amazing song is almost used as kind of the main theme for the show, which normally would be fine, except that the show rarely keeps to a serious atmosphere for long, which makes this music jarring at those times. A real shame, to be sure. That's the biggest thing with this series, I feel. It doesn't want to stick with a serious tone, even though the progression of the plot totally called for it. It adds levity where it is not wanted, and I don't feel that the show went as dark as it could have. Multiple times while watching this show, I had thought I had guessed what horrible thing would be happening in an upcoming episode, with the mindset that things always go from bad to worse. Oh, there's an Imperial Arms user that can reanimate dead corpses and have them fight for them. This must mean that in the future they're going to reanimate the corpse of one of the previously dead characters and have them fight against our protagonists, and there's going to be like this moral dilemma of, oh no, I don't want to fight my friend, but then they're forced to. That'd be amazing, but it never happened. On the other hand, I know that the series could have very easily fallen into the trap of getting a little too serious and started to involve things like sexual assault, as I know quite a few character backstories out of what we were shown could have easily gone in that direction. And in that case, I am very thankful that they did not, but I guess what I just really wanted was a bit more balance with the tone. That and an ending that didn't feel like a cop-out. The final number of episodes felt rather rushed, and the duels between characters that I thought were gonna happen never came to pass. The fights that did happen, at times I felt were miscast, and at the end of it all, I just had this feeling of, well, now what? It would have done well with a proper epilogue, and I'm not sure if we didn't get one because they didn't have the source material to make a proper one, or if they just truly thought that this was a good way to end the series. At the very least, I wish they didn't make two particular deaths near the end of the series as meaningless as they did. As much as I didn't like the characters in question, they deserved more than they got. And so, with all that in mind, I present Akame ga Kill with the recommendation to stream it rather than buy. It's perfect entertainment fodder for those looking for a good action fix, even if the plot and characters are lacking. It's a weird show where at times I found the show's quote-unquote villains to be more relatable than the heroes, even when most of the characters are dying left and right. While it wasn't truly satisfying, it should have enough to tide you over. At the time of this video, Akame ga Kill has been licensed in North America by Sentai Filmworks, with a home video release forthcoming. However, as my recommendation was to stream it, you can also check it out for free on Crunchyroll if you happen to have access to that site, and while you don't need a premium membership to Crunchyroll to watch the show, should you desire one, you can try out a free trial of Crunchyroll over at crunchyroll.com/classreflection for all the anime awesomeness that it contains. For alternate anime recommendations, I first point you towards Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, for a series that at times I feel like Akame ga Kill was trying to emulate in terms of tone, but failed horribly. Gurren Lagann did the balance of serious to funny so much better. Granted, they also had a tone of balls-to-the-wall ridiculousness, but hey, it worked. Now, for the second recommendation, I try to recommend something that not many people have seen. Unfortunately, most of the shows within this particular genre are extremely well known, but I would be remiss if at this juncture I did not recommend Full Metal Alchemist. I'll leave you to debate in the comments and figure out if you want to watch the original or the Brotherhood version, though many will recommend Brotherhood even if I wouldn't necessarily. Between those two, you should find something to your liking. That's it from me. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined. And hey, if you like what I do here and feel like helping out, please consider going and checking out my Patreon page and possibly donating. Very special thanks to Alex Vespucci, Tyler Morris, Ryan McAndywar, James Champion, and Walter Kelly for donating already. You guys are extremely awesome. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.